Welcome to Markets Now. I'm Michelle Rourke with Randy Martinson, Martinson Ag. We are mixed over in the livestock futures this morning. Hogs mostly lower. Cattle have been trying to rebound, but we're lower in the grains after a pretty good up day in corn and soybeans yesterday, Randy. The wheat market, is that the problem? Wheat down so hard, or did we just hit chart resistance in corn and beans?
I think it's more the wheat. You look at what's going on in the wheat market. It's, we've got, rain showers, in the forecast for Russia for the weekend. At least there's a little bit of a chance. I think that's putting some pressure on the market. We're also looking at, warm, dry conditions for the southern plains and the northern plains, which we need that right now to try to get the crop to grow. We need a little bit of heat. But down in the southern regions, of course, that means it's going to advance harvest. And so right now it's kind of, you got a double-edged sword where weather is being somewhat cooperative, and that's, I think, is adding some pretty good pressure.
Yeah. And we've worked a lot of that lower Russian crop news into the market price already, obviously. Turkey banning imports, was that at all a negative for the market this morning on the wheat side too?
I think it might have been a small negative, but really, they're just basically trying to, in the short term, protect their domestic market. They're more of an exporter than they are. I don't know how much they import, but I don't know if it will have as big of a play, but it's a news item that kind of, goes along with putting pressure on the market. And you've got the Matif wheat under some major pressure because of it. And I think that's spilling over to put pressure on the U.S. market.
Yeah, I was going to say we've been lockstep with that Matif market, so that seems to be part of it. And then are we getting harvest pressure?
We are getting harvest pressure. We're going to see a pretty good advancement in harvest, I think, this weekend with it breaking up into Kansas. Last week, we saw some test cutting. I think they're going to see a little more general harvest. And it'll be interesting to see what that Southwest crop comes in as, because that's been one that's been, we talked about as being a little bit lighter, a little bit smaller because of the dry conditions. We'll see this week, I think, with some actual harvest results.
Yeah. And corn and soybeans, you say following wheat, but let's talk about what we had this nice pop in the market yesterday in soybeans. Some of that was on maybe short covering, but also this news about Brazil raising their export tax, and talk about that. Is that actually going to happen?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, it's in play right now. From what I read this morning, that it actually is going to go into and be impacting or in play starting immediately, but they have to vote on it and it has to pass through their Congress within 4 months or it'll be removed. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but it is in play right now. I'm sure it helped a little bit. It's going to lower the price. It's going to prevent farmers from selling. And that might give a little bit of a advantage to the U.S. to be able to now compete with corn and soybean exports. The funny thing is we had an export sale of China announced this morning right after that news broke.
Yeah, and there was rumors of China business in the market already yesterday. What do you make of, China being in 3.8 million bushels is what they bought this morning?
It's time for them to start coming. I mean, they've got the Brazil harvest is basically done. We've moved through most of their product. I would expect that we'd start to see a little bit of demand. So seasonally, we should actually start to see it. So I'm not surprised to see China starting to buy, but it'll be interesting to see if they continue to buy and if we start seeing some new crop soybean sales, because there's nothing on the books right now.
No, and weekly exports on beans were not that good, old crop or new crop yesterday, although we did have a good export day for the corn market yesterday again, didn't we?
We did. And again, over 1 million metric ton and not much showing up on the daily wire. So we're selling a lot smaller amounts than anticipated to a lot of different buyers. So that is one nice thing about the exports for corn. Mexico has really been helping that market out and been a major buyer for U.S. corn because of the drought situation they're experiencing. And it's likely they will continue to buy corn from the U.S.
Yeah. The other thing, we're watching the extended weather forecast, and right now we could use a little heat, I know, in a lot of the corn belt, but the extended into late June and early July or into July looks pretty warm and dry.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. They're saying above normal to much above normal temps and below normal precip. And right now, that would probably be the worst case scenario that plays out as far as the grains are concerned, because we've got slow planting because of wet conditions. The grounds are saturated. There's no root system in this crop. So if we start to see drier conditions come into play without a root system, we're going to start to see heat stress show up a lot sooner in the crop than normal.
Yeah, we're not trading it this morning, obviously, but what is your thought as well about, we had, 9% of the corn to be planted nationally on the report this week, and we're past the last planting date in a lot of areas. Will we get it all planted, or will we see PP?
No, I think we're going to see prevent plant. I mean, I think like North Dakota's got 500,000 acres left to plant. South Dakota, I think, is in that 300, and Minnesota is up in that area as well. I would expect that we are going to see close to 1 million acres of prevent plant between just our 3 states. North Dakota likely will be close to 15%. Just because of the wet conditions and the fact, like you said, we're past the last planting date, significantly past the last planting date in most of those states. So I do think there, guys will try to switch over to beans, but there just isn't going to be enough time to get all this crop planted with the short window right now.
No doubt. And it feels like the funds are comfortable that we're going to get the crop planted, and they're back in sell mode, aren't they?
They are, and I don't know if it's just because they're looking at thinking that we're going to get the crop planted. They're also looking at, we've got a majority of the crop in the ground. We're looking at cooler, wetter conditions, and if you look back on years that saw cooler, wetter conditions, we always had trend or above trend line yields, and I think that's what they're really looking at.
No doubt. Let's also talk about the cattle market. We have been down quite a bit this week, or most days this week. We're trying to pop this morning. We've just been kind of continuing to be stuck in this mode where bird flu headlines kind of crash the market.
Yeah, we are. I mean, this week we thought we were trying, we have been able to break away from it, but more bird flu cases being found in Iowa, Minnesota, a death in Mexico of a worker at one of the dairy farms, not really related to avian flu, but still, listed as part, as one of the symptoms. And so, I mean, we just can't seem to break away from it, and it continues to put a little bit of a dark cloud over this market. And we also have the Fed meeting next week. It's kind of funny how we always see the cattle markets back off as we get closer to the Federal Reserve meetings.
Yeah, what are we expecting there?
I'm not expecting to see a rate increase. I would think the Fed would leave things unchanged at this point, but it's going to depend on where some of the CPI and the PPI numbers come out here. And right now, unemployment is favorable, so I think they're going to be leaning on no interest rate change.
Yeah. And finally, the hog market made new lows for the move again yesterday. Front end of the board tried to bounce, and now we're seeing a lot of red on the board again this morning. Are we going to find support in that market pretty soon, do you think?
Well, you'd think you'd be able to find support at some point, but I mean, we need to get demand picking up again, and with the cattle markets, also retreating, that competitive meats kind of seem to go together. It seems like this market is going to be under pressure for a little while longer, and I would expect probably by the end of the month, if we can see a decent hogs and pigs report, that might stabilize this market.
All right, thanks for joining us, Randy Martinson with Martinson Ag, and that is Markets Now.